Welcome to Poetry with Shing, where we uncover the beauty behind poetry. In today's episode, we'll be looking at Originally by Carol N. Duffy. Without further ado, let's begin. Originally by Carol N. Duffy conveys the idea of what defines an individual's identity and explores how an individual's identity can be shaped, voluntarily or involuntarily, by the changes happening around the individual. The poet conveys this idea through the process of the speaker migrating from Scotland to England and her experience assimilating into the English environment. The poet first introduces the speaker's sense of disorientation and loss, and the lack of agency she holds over her own fate. She then proceeds on to describe her gradual comprehension of the difficulties she has to face assimilating into England, and her growing maturity is coupled with rejection of assimilating into England. Finally, the speaker resigns to the fate of her emigration and assimilates into the English culture. So there's a gradual comprehension of the difficulties she has to face assimilating into England. And then finally, resignation to this assimilation. The poet first paints the scene of her family leaving Scotland through vivid imagery and diction, exemplifying the speaker's uncomprehending mind regarding the emigration due to her young age. The speaker's young voice and innocent, matter-of-fact tone is shown as she states she came from her own country, suggesting that her country is a possession and she identifies with it. So there's a form of identity here. Through the word own. Now that her family is leaving Scotland, her brother's cry and the repetition of home, over here, which her brothers bawl for, is much like a lament. So she's lamenting, which echoes the juvenile and childish feelings of the children and their yearning for home. Furthermore, the enjambment of home, home shows that the speaker's identity is now torn between two homes, Scotland and England, hinting at the beginning of her questioning of her personal identity. This separation of home and her personal identity was beyond her control due to her young age, and the emigration happened really quickly as her vehicle fell through the fields. Over here. The vivid imagery of the vehicle hurtling through to get to England conveys the sense of the immigration being an uncontrollable action. On the speaker's part, the alliteration fell through the fields also brings emphasis to the process of emigration. So alliteration for emphasis, which she remembers vividly and impacted her greatly even after she grew up, as seen from the subsequent lines. The speed of the emigration can also be seen as the speaker recalls her old home and the miles rushed back to the city. The diction of rushed portrays the speed of the travel and how it is too fast for a young mind to comprehend. As the speaker recalls, she ends with the imagery of the vacant rooms where her family didn't live anymore. So, adding a tone of sadness, emptiness, and a sense of loss of heritage and identity by the speaker. Although young, the speaker understands that she's going to a new place, and she fears the future, although unaware of what the future holds for her. This can be seen through the vivid imagery of the speaker staring at the eyes of a blind toy, holding its paw. The blind toy is a comparison to herself. And it being blind symbolizes how she cannot predict, and hence fears the future. She seeks comfort to soothe her fears through holding the blind toy's paw, further emphasizing her young age and the overwhelming shock of change due to emigration, which ultimately impacted her greatly in her future years. So there's an element of comfort in holding the paw. Although at first she was unaware of what was to come for herself, the innocent tone of the speaker slowly morphs into one of greater maturity in the next few lines of the poem. The poet goes on to describe how life is like in England, highlighting the growing maturity and comprehension of how she should adapt to the new environment in England. In addition, with the growing maturity of the speaker, she starts to realize the difficulties of fitting in and rejects living in England. The use of listing of happenings in a neighborhood which faces high the use of listing of happenings in a neighborhood highlights how the speaker experiences a sense of disorientation and shows difficulties she faces. Through the line, standing resigned up an avenue where no one you know. So, where no one you know stays. So there's this idea of feeling lost, disorientated, and also highlights her sense of unfamiliarity with England, leaving her unhappy. The sense of disorientation is further shown as corners which seem familiar, leading to unimagined pebble-dashed estates, as what she originally thought of her bearings. As what she originally thought of her bearings proved to be wrong and unexpected. The unfamiliar environment led her to be unprepared and unsure of what to expect of England. She also feels intimidated and threatened, as the diction of big, which describes the big boys in the neighborhood. The big boys over here, and as well as her wrong accent. So your accent wrong, are harsh and intimidating in the midst of the unfamiliarity. So it's intimidating, harsh. So she's disoriented. And there's also a sense of isolation and loneliness, as the speaker does not know anyone in the neighborhood. Through the line, no one you know stays. A metaphor is used. Childhood is an emigration, summing up the difficulties she faced as she transitioned from one phase of life to the next. So, childhood is like an emigration. So, transitioning from one phase of life to the next. From childhood to teenage years, which is similar to the transition from Scotland to England. The total upheaval of herself to another place, hinting at the growth of the speaker's maturity as she starts to look at emigration through a more understanding lens. However, with the growing maturity of the speaker, she starts to reject living in England due to the difficulties that she faces, such as loneliness and disorientation. She tells her parents that she wants her own country, suggesting she wants to move back to Scotland due to feelings of alienation and the presence of a cultural gap. The cultural disorientation she feels pushes her to reject England and leaves her parents anxious, with a simile used through her parents' anxiety stirred like a loose tooth. This anxiety does not cause pain, but is nagging and constant, just like a loose tooth. Furthermore, the loose tooth is symbolic of her losing her innocence. That's right here. Losing her innocence as the dropping of teeth symbolizes maturation and the growth from childhood to teenage years. However, as time passes, she starts to learn to accept and assimilate into the culture of England. The speaker finally resigns to her fate and blends into England, almost like a natural process. There is a volta in the poem indicated through the word but then you forget. And the speaker's initial loss, confusion, and rejection evolve into resignation and acceptance. So the initial loss, confusion, and rejection evolve into resignation and acceptance. Her identity as a person from Scotland has also slowly been lost. The speaker uses the pronoun you, detaching herself. So there's a sense of detachment here. indicating that change does not only affect her, but also everyone. So it changes the universe. She voluntarily and involuntarily forgets or doesn't recall about her life in Scotland, hinting that she has gradually assimilated into the English culture. Her forgetting her past is in contrast with her memory of herself blending in, through the line, I remember my tongue shedding its skin like a snake. The use of contrasting words suggests that she only chooses to remember herself assimilating, which is a natural process, like how a snake sheds its skin. The simile also indicates that her accent changes naturally with her maturation, as a snake sheds its skin as it grows, and is a symbol of renewal for the speaker. Shedding skin is a symbol of renewal. However, the symbol of a snake also symbolizes deception and hints at how her assimilation into the culture may be merely a tool for her self-deception. And the deception of others around her. With her coming of age, she recognizes that she has lost more than a river, culture, speech, sense of first space, and the right place. And comes to realize that she has lost her identity. When strangers ask her where she was from originally, she hesitates. This shows that her identity has blended and she is unable to answer the stranger. As she is uncertain of the identity within her and finds it difficult to reconcile with the society, as she is neither Scottish nor English but a mix of both. So she struggles to answer because her identity is a mix of both Scottish and English. The poem traces the struggles of the speaker to reconcile with her identity and understand her identity. This is much like how everyone has to transition from childhood to adulthood and face similar struggles of their identity as well. That's all for today's episodes of Poetry with Shing. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and see you at our next episode. Goodbye.